Everybody follow in behind them. Come on, back and swoop around. Come on. Come on, Terry. Do it.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Olivet Institutional Baptist Church, and certainly under different circumstances we wish we were gathered here on today. In a few moments you will be hearing from the family of Tamir Rice. Behind me you will see Miss Samaria Rice, the mother of Tamir, his father Leonard Warner, Mildretta Warner Davis, Tamir's grandmother. Councilman Jeff Johnson is with us, as well as State Senator Shirley Smith, Dr. Todd Davidson, the pastor of the Antioch Missionary Baptist Church, Mr. Ed Little, a community activist, Mr. Attorney Benjamin Crump, and Attorney Walter Madison, who are representing the family of Tamir Rice, as well as others here in both concern for both this family as well as justice in our community. Again, I am the pastor, the Reverend Dr. Juwan Zakoven, pastor here at the Olivet Institutional Baptist Church. Now, without further ado, Attorney Crump.
First of all, we'd like to thank you, Pastor Coven, for allowing us to come to this wonderful facility to talk about these important matters. The family of Tamir Rice is very grateful to you and all the clergy and community leaders who are assembled here to show support for the family. As Pastor Coven said, I'm Attorney Benjamin Crump. I have the honor, along with Attorney Walter Madison, of representing, recently retained by the mother, Samaria Rice, and the father, Leonard Warner, the parents of Tamir Rice, in what has been a very tumultuous 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks for them since the tragic death of their child. They're going to address you all for the first time and talk about why we're here today. First, Attorney Madison and I would just like to pose some questions for the city of Cleveland and specifically the police department. As Ms. Rice and her family and colleagues have posed questions to us, with the main emphasis of retaining us to get justice for their child, to get justice and hold those responsible for taking Tamir away from them, especially in light of the Ferguson grand jury with Michael Brown Jr. and the Staten Island grand jury with Eric Gardner, where there it was on video as well, and the grand jury failed to indict. The family is very distrustful of whether local authorities will indict a police officer, even though it is very clear, very transparent, that several things were done inappropriately to kill their 12-year-old child while he played with a toy gun at the playground just yards, not 100 yards away from their house, literally across the street, down the block. Ms. Rice will tell you how that Saturday at 3 o'clock she prepared lunch for her children, her 12-year-old son Tamir, her 14-year-old daughter, and that they then went to the recreation center as they had done many, many times before. It was just a normal, regular day, never knowing that that was going to be the last time she got to see her son. We ask you to please understand that this is difficult for them. This is their first time speaking publicly, and so they're going to do the best they can. One of the things that they are asking is, why is this police officer on paid vacation after what he did to their child? They're also asking, what was the failure, what was the breakdown in communications between the 911 dispatcher and the police officer that led to this life-ending scenario that left her 12-year-old son bleeding on the playground that he loved so much? They asked, why did the police officers treat them like they did that night after this tragic occurrence? His 14-year-old sister was with him at the recreation center. She had went to the bathroom. She was told that somebody had been shot on the playground, and then she was told it was your little brother who had been shot. She ran out as fast as she could trying to get to her brother, yelling and screaming, and she told her mother she was tackled by the police officers and she was put in handcuffs in the police car, the same exact police car that you see in the video where the shooter drove up in and within seconds of arriving shot Tamir. They put her in that same police car in handcuffs while she looked out the window at her little brother laying on the ground bleeding out. All the witnesses say they didn't see police officers attempt to perform CPR. And so the family has many, many questions that needs to be answered. If police officers are ill-equipped to deal with children playing on the playground with toy guns, then we may have to consider outlawing all toy guns, because this scenario cannot happen again in America. We cannot have children playing cops and robbers on the playground and police officers coming and claiming their lives because they are not equipped to deal with an encounter with a kid and a toy gun. They're supposed to de-escalate, not escalate a situation, and everything you see in that video escalated the situation. And so his parents have many, many, many questions that are burning in their heart, that is crying out for a response from the city leaders and the city police department. This family is asking that people stand with them so that their child's life won't be swept under the rug, and that his death won't be in vain, and that something positive can come out of this. At this time, Attorney Walter Madison is going to briefly address you, and then you will hear from Tamir's mother and father. Mr. Madison.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Colvin and my co-counsel and this wonderful community, which is a small representation of this international community that is now faced with this issue. Our communities have become the enemies of our protectors. This family that stands behind me shares the pain, as of late all too common, from New York City all the way to California. The police and our public servants are here to protect us. They have a sworn duty to do so. Incumbent in that sworn duty is adherence to the training, common sense, and decent humanity. On this particular day, at that recreation park, a playground, a child, while playing, died. Who protects Tamir Rice? We were engaged and retained as counsel to protect what is left of Tamir Rice's legacy. If we cannot get this change, a systemic issue, and a change in how police interact with our community to protect all of our children, then this problem will continue. More pain, more parents, as those standing behind me, will have to experience what we experience right here in our own communities. We know that each and every state police officer is trained and equipped with basic CPR. There's been no account from any witness that there was ever any effort to resuscitate or sustain the life of young Tamir. I leave with you an expression of their wish to protect our children and to protect what is left of young Tamir Rice. Thank you.
Now at this time we'll have his mother, Shamara, and his father, Leonard, come and address you. Take your time.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Samaria Rice, and on November 22nd, about 3:30 p.m., reminding you that I stay right across the street from the recreation center. Two little boys came and knocked on my door and said the police just shot your son twice in the stomach. So my 16-year-old son stormed out the door and I was right after him. When I arrived on the scene, I seen my son, the 16-year-old, off to the side with the police, and they was putting him in the police car. I noticed my son laying down on the ground, and I went charging and yelling and everything at the police because they wouldn't let me through. And then I seen my daughter in the back of the police car, the same car that the shooter got out of. As I was trying to get through to my son, the police told me to calm down or they will put me in the back of the police car. And so of course I calmed down, and I asked the police to let my daughter go, and they wouldn't at that time. And I asked them, you know, what's going on, and they wasn't telling me anything but just calm down, calm down. I noticed the police is just standing around and they wasn't doing anything. And again, I arrived the same time the ambulance did. So again, I just noticed them, they wasn't doing anything. My daughter was screaming for me, and my son, I really couldn't get to him because he was, you know, a little bit across the walkway, my 16-year-old. So after I couldn't get to him and they told me to calm down, they gave me an ultimatum of whether I stay with the 14-year-old or do I go with the 12-year-old. This is what they told me. So, of course I went with the 12-year-old, and they made me sit in the front of the ambulance truck like I was a passenger. So when my daughter arrived at the hospital, she came to me and told me that somebody came and told her in the wreck that your brother was shot, and she came running, and she told me that the police tackled her and put her in handcuffs. I didn't even know she was in handcuffs. I knew she was crying for me, but I couldn't see her hands, and this is what she told me, that she was in handcuffs in the back of the car. They also questioned her with no adult around, and I guess that's it.
Ms. McLeod, you want to say anything? Okay. We will, yeah, I'll let you step back, sir. You want to it's right there. We will try to take a few of your questions, and then we will have Pastor Coven and some of the city leaders address you. Or do you want to let the city leaders go first?
Let's make some comments.
Okay, we'll let the city leaders make some comments, and then we'll take some questions. I'll turn it over to Pastor Coven.
Thank you, Rice family, and certainly thank Mr. Ben Crump and Madison for taking on this and putting this part of a national conversation. You see flanked around this family representatives from various aspects of our community, the faith community, public officials, and I think it represents that there is community concern at the highest levels and the widest and the deepest levels with respect to seeing not only justice for Tamir, but for all of the victims and the families of those who have been affected by excessive use of force within our law enforcement division. And certainly we recognize that the vast majority of all those who serve in our community, protecting us, serve, are doing a fine job, and certainly, but we also align ourselves with the Department of Justice report that there are systemic problems. With that, I add my voice, and there are others who have added their voice to Councilman Jeff Johnson, who have called for three things. The first thing is for the immediate resignation and or dismissal of Executive Assistant for Special Projects, Mr. Marty Flask, as well as the dismissal as resignation of our Director of Public Safety, Mr. Michael McGrath. We've also asked for the mayor we would like to see the mayor begin a national search for a new public safety director who can help lead our division of police through the transformation that the Department of Justice report is calling for, and that will be federally overseen by the courts. In addition to that, there are a number of community stakeholders who would like to be a part of that conversation. Obviously, the mayor, as the chief executive of the city, will make that appointment, but we would like to be a part of that conversation to ensure that the person who is going to be overseeing our division of police, working along with our chief Calvin Williams, will recognize that this is going to demand strategic thinking. It is going to demand 21st century leadership in order to have the true transformational leadership overall throughout the city, from the top brass all the way to the rank and file, to see the type of transformation to ensure that the type of tragedies that we have seen most recently and over the course of many years here in our city no longer happen again. And so to our faith community and to our leaders in the business community, I want to appeal to you that to not be silent, that to be silent in this instance and so many other instances as we seek to be a transformational city, a 21st century city, that silence is unacceptable. Silence is unacceptable. Jeff Johnson.
To the family and to Pastor Colvin, my perspective today comes from one of 18 elected officials that have a responsibility to the citizens of Cleveland to provide constitutional and proper police services. We have failed Tamir Rice in that effort. The voices of the 18 must be heard. It should be voices of reform and voices of support for Tamir Rice's family and to bring justice for Tamir Rice. If we cannot protect our children, if our children are killed in the streets by those we hire to protect them, then we all are at risk. And we have failed in our responsibilities as leaders at City Hall. And the public has to challenge us on that. From Mayor Jackson down to every one of the council people, there is a problem in the Cleveland Police Department, notwithstanding what the mayor says. It is systematic, but it's also personal accountability on every officer that are involved with the escalation of violence, personal violence, and excessive force. So I'm here to say to the family that I recognize my responsibility as one of 18. And I recognize how we failed it. So today, I'm calling on the public to make us right, to challenge Mayor Jackson, to challenge each and every one of our colleagues, my colleagues and myself, to do a better job of having employees that are hired to protect and serve, that are given a license to carry a gun, and in proper cases, a license to use deadly force when appropriate. So we're going to work together. Today in City Council, we're going to challenge them. And we're going to challenge my colleagues today to get their act together, speak up, and quit being silent on this. And finally, the treatment of the family is unacceptable. It was already the loss of their son that they also lost their dignity right there as they had a natural emotional response. It just shows the lack of training when we shackle a grieving sister, threaten a grieving mother, and then, of course, not even take care of the child laying on the ground. We've got a lot of work to do here, folks, and I'm here to help. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We're going to take a few questions, and then we're going to let the family go. So if you have a few questions, we'll get them out the way. Yeah. What needs to happen and what the family has retained me and Attorney Madison for is to try to make sure that this process is transparent and that it's not swept under the rug as so many others are. So they're going to be requesting formally and the media that the prosecutor act, that they do a very transparent investigation, and if there's enough probable cause that exists from the evidence that we know, that we don't need to have another grand jury. That they can just indict the officer and let this family have what the American Constitution guarantees all its citizens, and that's trial by jury. And that's what this family is asking for.
Sorry, you're an attorney. You say don't take it to a grand jury?
Absolutely, absolutely. People,
how does that happen?
let me make it real clear, sir. There is nothing written anywhere in the law that police officers are to be treated differently than any other citizen. People from this family's community, they don't go to grand juries when the police arrest and charge them. This is some unwritten rule that we have all accepted that has to be. We talked about it in Ferguson. When there's probable cause, you don't have to have a grand jury. You can do what the Constitution says and charge the person. The police officers are no greater than any other American citizen. We're all equal. This notion of due process of the law applies to Tamir Rice too, not just the police officer. So why are we going to give greater consideration to the police officer and the things that he did in that video, which I suggest is enough probable cause to indict the police officer now and have a trial by jury where everybody can see it, it can be transparent, and this family and this community can believe that justice system works for everybody equally.
Jack?
For Ms. Rice, what would you consider a just outcome of the case on behalf of your son?
What would you consider?
Repeat your question, Jack.
What would Ms. Rice consider a just outcome of this case?
To answer your question, I'm actually looking for a conviction. Thank you.
While you're up there, can you tell me, was it the same police that shot your son, that handcuffed your daughter and put her in the car?
What we know is that she ended up in the same vehicle with that officer.
Okay.
Again, is the lawsuit that, is that going to remain in place?
Well, at this time, the family retained us to focus on their primary objective, and their primary objective is to hold the killer of their child accountable, and that is in the criminal sector. They want him to be held accountable. As she just said, they want him to be convicted. They will deal with the civil matters at the appropriate time, but right now they believe the appropriate thing to do is to get justice for their child, to make sure this police officer is arrested, and as the mother said, better than I could ever say, they want him convicted for killing their child. Okay, one last one.
Yes. My question is, what role did the neo-Nazi movement within the ranks and leadership of the Cleveland Police Department, not only with Samaria, but also with the 137 shots that occurred again in November, on the 29th day of November in 2012?
I think the federal government has just issued a report, so we'll let that speak to that there. And we're still trying to.
Leadership of the Cleveland Police Department, sir.
Okay, we're still trying to get.
Jeff Nelson, tonight, he works down there.
Okay, well, right now we're going to. Okay, he'll get the answer to that. Right now we're going to let the family move on. One last question for the family, and then we'll let whatever city leaders address whatever they feel is appropriate. And Pastor Cover. Yes, ma'am.
Rice, as a mom, what was in your mind when those kids knocked on your door and when you got to the scene?
I really thought they was playing, like joking around. But I seen the seriousness in their face, and it scared me. Because my child doesn't do things like that. I don't allow that type of toy in my house around him, period.
Do you know where he got that from? That's right.
A friend, one of his little friends he played with.
What can you tell us about Tamir? What would you like us to remember about him?
Tamir was a bright child. He had a promising future. And he was very talented in all sports, soccer, basketball, football. He played the drums, he drew, he played video games. He's a great swimmer. The community loved him. He was a helper at the school and at the rec. And, everybody just loved him.
He was your baby? He was your baby?
And he was my baby. He's the youngest out of 4. He's very attached to me.
What grade was he in?
He's a 6th grader.
Thank y'all. Let's go.
To say to the officer.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Reverend Calvin? Can you take one more question? Your remarks about the changes in police leadership.
Yes, there has been among community leaders a letter that we have been looking at petitioning and having signers to ask for those 3 things. Again, the immediate resignation of Mr. Flask and Chief McGrath, the search nationally for a new public safety director to lead us through reform and transformation, and the forming of an advisory committee to assist the mayor in appointing that new chief.
Can you elaborate why you believe the change in leadership is necessary?
Because I think that when you look at the wholesale challenges that the DOJ report reveal, and consistently under Mr. McGrath and Mr. Flask, we've had 2 federal investigations. What it demonstrates is there is a need, at least from from our observation, that in light of these 2 federal investigations, that there is not the ability to implement the necessary reforms. And even you think of both a cultural letter, we're going to need people who can be good faith partners with the community, as well as overall, who can instill confidence that the changes that need to take place in the police department will indeed take place. And 2 federal investigations in the last 2 years in which the reforms that were agreed upon, which between the federal, the Justice Department and the Cleveland Police, were either inadequately implemented, were not implemented, or certainly did not prevent such tragedies. And so we need some new leadership.
Calvin Williams, the chief of police, he's been in Cleveland police leadership for a long time, though he just became his chief. Why not ask for his resignation?
Because the 2 most consistent persons in the last 2 years with respect to those federal investigations in terms of the 2 top positions have been the chief of police and the director of public safety. That is Mr. McGrath and Mr. Flash. Thank you all very much.
Reverend, Jay.